Thank you, Congressman. And the Congressman's parallels to Iraq are a good introduction to Major General Paul Eaton. As a retired U.S. Army General, Major General Eaton had a long and distinguished career with the U.S. Army, and prior to his retirement in 2006, served as the Commanding General of the Coalition Military Assistance Training Team in Iraq. In that role, he was charged with rebuilding the Iraqi Armed Forces. March 2004 to June 2004, Major General Eaton was further charged with the development of all security forces. Major General,
thank you. Well, I've already tipped my hand on the where I'm coming from. The Rumsfeld comment is really operative. Mr. Rumsfeld tried to fight a counterinsurgency warfare as if you were fighting a high-intensity combined arms conflict. And it's instructive to know that on 9/10/2001, every soldier, every Marine, airman, seaman in the Armed Forces of the United States was training for high-intensity combined arms warfare with a peer or near-peer competitor. And we took that force to war in Afghanistan and in Iraq. And we've had a couple of comments on, is this really a war? And that's, it's a great question, and it is particularly important that we get a decent answer for it. So I'm not an Afghanistan expert, a force development expert, combined arms warfare, that's what I do. And I would nominate a lot of people, but I'd particularly like to nominate somebody I'm going to quote, a Colonel Martin Schweitzer should address this crowd. He is he's the 4th Brigade commander of the 82nd Airborne, and happened to be my son's commander when my oldest was over there with his brigade. And this fellow stated in a New York Times interview, "I don't need any more combat power. I need agriculture experts, I need water engineers, I need doctors, nurses, dentists." He had a quote in there from a young Army specialist, a medic, who says, after going through one Afghanistan village, these people don't need doctors, they need miracle workers. So you've got the fact that your military leadership understands what we need to adapt to out there. I'm going to give you a quote from 1964. Somebody who, this fellow's work was instructive to a manual that you really ought to read if you're interested in this. And FM 3-24 is the Army's counterinsurgency manual. And most Army manuals are real snoozers, but this one is actually a pretty good manual. And it's well constructed, and you can, in very short order, learn a whole lot about counterinsurgency warfare. And it's counterinsurgency warfare that was developed by looking at British actions in Malaysia, by looking at Australian work, and it's a good document. But here it's in 1964. David Galula writes, essential though it is, the military action is secondary to the political one. Its primary purpose to afford the political power and enough freedom to work safely with the population. And he goes on to say that soldiers cannot walk away from non-soldier missions. Civil engineer, social worker, nurse, Boy Scout. But only for as long as he can't be replaced, for it is better for civilian tasks to be done by civilians. So, I had to recommended reading the FM 3-24. Secretary Gates gave a speech 26 November 2007 out at Kansas State University, Manhattan, Kansas. And right next to Manhattan, Kansas is the 1st Infantry Division, the Big Red One. And so it's kind of a military town, and he was speaking to an audience. And if you read that speech, you're going to hear from a secretary who fully understands counterinsurgency warfare and who would like to transform the national security apparatus of the United States. So On top of that, there's a great book out there called The Imperial Grunt. And this goes a little bit to the Congressman's comment. It's by Robert Kaplan. And it outlines all the good in the world that small units of U.S. military have delivered. Normally, it's military on military. Military ambassadors to military operations. And our military, the younger the better, are great ambassadors to other armed forces out there. So there's a lot of good work done by small units, and it's not necessarily military. But what are the military core competencies that we've got out there? When you look at the COIN manual, the counterinsurgency manual, you see 5 lines of operation. 2 are military core competencies, 3 are other agencies. The 2 military are security and host nation military development, host nation security development. Now, the first, I'll go through the laundry list. Secure the population continuously. Clear, don't leave, hold, build. You separate the insurgent from the population. You counter criminality, petty or organized. I spent some time in Somalia, and one of the biggest problems we had was criminals. They were just bad guys, and they were doing bad things. And if your population is not secure, first mission of government, secure the population, then you're not going to have lasting gains. You secure the borders. There's another military term, you isolate the objective. If you don't secure the border, then you cannot render continuous influence. You're going to have a constantly changing mosaic out there. And then you integrate with the host nation forces as quickly as possible. That's the military core competency of providing security. Now, in the host nation development, when you're talking about developing the host nation forces, then you're developing the concept, the mission, the structure. What should these forces look like? When I went into Iraq, I had a blank sheet of paper. Nobody told me what to do. So here you had a U.S. general and his very small staff figured it out until I could get competent Iraqis into my organization to tell me, to instruct me, inform me on what Iraqi armed forces needed. It took a couple of weeks to get him vetted into the system. You've got to identify and recruit leaders. You have to establish training centers. Here's the big problem in Afghanistan right now in force development for the ANA and for the police, is infrastructure. If you want to bring soldiers into a volunteer army, you can't have them living in a lean-to. You've got to provide infrastructure. You have to provide barracks, and you have to provide mess halls, and you have to provide rangers. All of that takes time and money. We have had a lot of time. We have not given the Afghanistan mission the money it needs or the focus it needs. And then you've got to provide for basic and training, and then you've got to bring, again, this is point 5 in the earlier one, you've got to bring in the host nation forces into its mission. Another great guy to bring here is Captain Eaton, who is my younger son, who is a special forces officer who worked with, he had a 14-man ODA, and he worked with the Afghan National Army. So wherever he went, he had a like number of Afghan soldiers who were partnered with him, who went out on the mission. So their missions were not always trying to identify people that needed killing. They were trying to help the Afghan population, bringing to bear the team that they could. Let me talk a little bit about the French. You know, after all this business, nobody seems to like the French much. I love